You're listening to Myers-Briggs Question Corner with Edythe Richards.
Hello folks, this is part 2 of INFP Interview Struggles. In our first episode, I shared some common challenges INFP types face on job interviews, and we heard a dialogue of what an interview might sound like between an INFP candidate and an ESTJ or ENTJ interviewer. Many thanks to my producer David and his partner Teresa for lending their voices. I also pointed out a few common interview pitfalls and some alternate responses. In this episode, I'm going to share some more specific communication highlights for INFP types and how they can accommodate different styles to give them the best advantage during a job interview. Let's talk about the natural style of INFP types first. As we know, INFPs tend to be considerate, flexible, and creative, and these attributes are very often evident in how they perform in a job interview, as we heard in the previous episode. Without realizing it, INFPs will often flex to the other person's style, waiting to hear their concerns and viewpoints and understand them before deciding how they will respond. In other words, they see communication as unique to the individual and situation. They're also focused on what's meaningful to them. For example, we heard interviewee Teresa discussing her passion for bringing awareness to disability-related issues through journalism. INFPs, by their nature, tend to be reserved and modest, with a preference for deep interactions with a select few people. So this can make it difficult to boast about accomplishments during a job interview. We also heard a few stumbles when interviewer David became a little forceful and direct, and this is indicative of INFPs in the corporate world. There's a reason why INFPs are the Myers-Briggs type least represented in the corporate world. Their natural style doesn't lend itself well to the cutthroat, competitive world of business. Many INFP types who have found a place in business have found that they've had to compromise something of themselves to get there and stay there. And that's a tough pill for an INFP to swallow. INFPs are people who live by their values and avoid any type of interpersonal conflict. A few tips I have for INFPs communicating with ESTJs, ENTJs, or anyone with a different style. First, especially in an interview, share your accomplishments. This isn't the time to sit back and wait. Yes, there is a fine line between confidence and conceit, but INFP types will often err on the side of modesty, which can cause them to miss out on great opportunities. Now, it takes practice to promote the great things you've done throughout your career with ease, so do enlist the help of a trusted friend, colleague, or counselor to help you with this if needed. Second, be as logical and detailed as you are passionate. Remember that some people, especially in the corporate world, expect to hear a logical framework for how you made decisions. These folks often prefer an assertive approach and expect proof from reliable sources to show how credible you are. Third, resist the urge to vacillate. Be direct when needed, remembering that some people are impatient with inefficiency. Many people prefer a take the bull by the horns approach than to encourage or motivate. Meeting them where they are will actually win you favor. Last, as difficult as it may be, don't take feedback personally. Instead, think of any constructive feedback as a developmental tool. But with that said, interviewee Teresa did a great job in last episode's dialogue. There are a few things that I'm going to point out to make it an even better interview. If you're tuning in, and whether you're an INFP type or not, one of the most important things to remember is that each interview is going to be different. Each interviewer is a unique person with a different perspective. There's no telling whether they'll ask standard interview questions, how they'll judge you, or what curveballs, if any, they'll throw. The best thing you can do is to practice and prepare. Practice answering a variety of questions and prepare, meaning research the organization, the work they're doing, how they measure success, and what's important to them. Research, if possible, the people you'll be interviewing with. The more you know, the better you'll be able to position yourself during the interview. In my over 15 years of counseling job seekers, here is my biggest piece of advice to you, the interviewee. You need to match your interviewer. You need to communicate to them in a way they can hear. They've got the power. You need to find a way to get them to both like you and to find you credible. And this is really, really hard, and it's why practice is so important. Remember that interviews are subjective. There are some things you won't be able to control, and yes, you may be judged unfairly. Ultimately, if I were to break it down into 3 things the interviewer is looking for, those are: 1, what experience and skills do you have that we need right now? 2, why do you want to work for us? And 3, are you the right fit for us? What I'm going to do now is to go through last episode's questions and provide context from the interviewer's point of view and an alternate response from the interviewee. Let's start from the beginning.
Thanks for meeting with us today. I was very impressed with your resume and the tremendous amount of research you've done to get your work published in such high-profile publications. I'm sure your articles have done wonders for raising the number of readers, especially for your last employer. So tell me about yourself and why you're applying for this job as a content editor for our online magazine.
This is the classic first interview question. Tell me about yourself and why you're here. This is the either make it or break it chance for the interviewee. Now, interviewer David actually gave a clue to what he was looking for: high-profile publications, increased number of readers, depth of research. If interviewee Teresa is savvy enough, she can use this information to her advantage in her response. Let's hear what she says.
Well, I've got a lot of experience in editing and writing. I've worked for several different organisations that promote the treatment of disabilities and birth defects. Those are my specialty areas, and that's why I've applied for this job. I really appreciate the work you do to foster the understanding of disability-related issues. I really love to do pieces on the work that's being done in those areas worldwide. It's just an underreported topic, and it's only now starting to gain some momentum. So obviously, I'm really passionate about those topics. I was the senior writer and content producer most recently for Charitable Works. It actually says that in my resume.
First, what Teresa did here was to talk about her passion for the industry and how she appreciates the work this company is doing as it aligns with her experience. Teresa missed an opportunity, though, in talking specifics. Where was she published? What articles of hers were the most read? She could have talked about her approach to research and how it led to those publications and what the outcome was. There were a lot more specific things she could have said. The key with this question is to do your research to find out what qualities this specific company is looking for and, in your answer, demonstrate that you possess them. Also, get straight to the point. Try not to hesitate and minimize your and uhs. Let's hear an alternate response.
Thanks for having me here today, David. I've been a science content writer and editor for over 15 years, most recently for Charitable Works. As you know, my early research focused on hospital-acquired infection diseases in children, and this led to covering stories nationwide on birth defects. And I soon realised how much of an issue this is worldwide. As a journalist, my purpose is to build awareness of disability-related issues that stem from birth defects, and that's what intrigues me about this job. One of my recent publications on the link between maternal fever in early pregnancy and birth defects was picked up by CBS News, and I was invited as a guest on their CBS medical podcast. The podcast is huge, over 100,000 downloads per day, and my guest appearance actually sparked interest in online subscriptions at Charitable Works. In fact, that interview I gave was instrumental in helping us to exceed targets for the entire year. I know your magazine is focused on creating content to spread the word about the important issues and gain more followers. I'm excited to share my thoughts on how I can help to meet your goals and partner with similar organisations that share your mission to help children grow up healthy.
What a great response. Here are some things Teresa did well. She used the interviewer's name. Using someone's name is the greatest connection to their identity. It helps to create a connection with the person and to get their attention. Teresa then gave context to her interest in this field, but briefly and succinctly. She shared how she got started and some of her career growth, but she focused on her accomplishments as they related to the interviewer's needs. And as we heard, interviewer David is focused on increased readership. And since Teresa did her research beforehand, she already had an answer with an example prepared. In short, she was able to convey her experience with specific examples that related to the employer's needs. What you don't want to do when asked this question is to tell your life story, to talk about things that aren't related to the job, or to regurgitate your resume. Research the position, the employer, focus on their needs, and find examples from your experience that will resonate with them. Let's move on to another interview question.
Well, I'm sure you know, this position is writing on regulatory and policy issues, but not just writing content. We are looking for someone who proofreads and edits for grammatical errors and typos, but we're also looking for someone who's super organized and proficient with SharePoint. A large part of this job is going to be logistical. There's a lot of admin work involved. What are your thoughts on this?
Interviewer David is asking for clarification on Teresa's interest in this particular position, as well as her proficiency and comfort with some of the more technical aspects of the job. Let's hear how Teresa answers.
Well, I'm pretty familiar with SharePoint. That's the platform I've been using for the last several years.
Teresa hesitates, which we've already mentioned is a no-no, and she says, I'm pretty familiar with SharePoint, instead of, I'm proficient with SharePoint and have been actively using it for over 5 years. Remember, confident and specific. Let's hear an alternate response.
I understand the need for a keen eye for editing and proofreading, especially with a writing staff as large as yours. It's easy to become entrenched in the weeds when it's our own content, and that's why I appreciate working on a team who helps each other out on these things, as well as the logistics and administrative tasks you mentioned. I'm at a point in my career where I am excited about the opportunity to contribute in ways in addition to writing content. In my last job, I took on the role of managing the invoice process. I streamlined the process, which saved our group at least 24 hours each month and significantly reduced errors on the invoices. This was due to my organisational skills and my willingness to pitch in when I saw there was a problem. So to answer your question, I understand the administrative tasks are a part of any job and SharePoint, along with a great team, which has helped me to stay organised in my past positions. Since you are also using SharePoint, I have no doubt that I'll be able to jump right in.
What Teresa did exceptionally well here is to relate a quote-unquote small accomplishment that highlighted the skills interviewer David was looking for. And it seems to have put his fears to rest.
Great, you've got a lot of experience with SharePoint. We found it to be the ideal platform to collaborate with our team. One way we've been doing this is to improve our organisation's intranet. And we found more employees are using it to access information once we started using it.
Let's hear how Teresa responds.
Oh, I see. That's great to hear that you found a content management system that works for you.
Awkward silences can be tricky. It can make you, as the interviewee, sound unsure and less than confident. This silence could have been used to further share a success story regarding the topic at hand. What to do when faced with this? If you've thoroughly prepared, you can anticipate some of the problems the employer is tackling. Choose a success story from your background that shows you exhibit the same skills the employer is looking for. Be specific and use the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. Focus on the result of your efforts and resist the urge to ramble on if this is your tendency. Now, let's move to a different question.
Right. So I see you've written a lot of content. So let's start this portion of the interview with an easy question. Now, this is a two-part question. Once you publish your content, how do you promote it? And how do you analyze the performance?
Interviewer David lets interviewee Teresa know that in addition to good content writing, she will be expected to perform outreach and promotional efforts for their organization. Teresa should already know this if she's done her due diligence and should have an example prepared. Let's hear her response.
That's a good question. Obviously, it's important to share the work with the intended audience. I've done that in all my previous positions. It's very important to me to write content that resonates with others, gets them to think, brings a call to action.
If you're thinking of a response to a question, it's normal to fill the silence with, "That's a great question," or a similar filler while you're thinking of a response. But note that the more you practice, the less likely you'll do this, as you'll have your responses ready, and this will increase your confidence in the interview. Teresa stated that she did share her content with audiences in all of her previous jobs, but she didn't share specifics. In this situation, have a step-by-step answer ready. For example,
when I've shared my content in the past, I've used a three-pronged approach. First, I share on social media platforms, particularly LinkedIn, using relevant hashtags. Second, because I've built up a large following over the years, I have 30,000 connections on LinkedIn alone. I ask my followers and connections to share my content on my behalf. Third, I've reached out to the industry influencers to ask for their opinion. Having an expert weigh in boosts credibility. And of course, integrating SEO into all of my work will also help to raise the rank of your online magazine in the search results.
And there you have it. Excellent response. Teresa had 3 very specific examples from her past, and she related it to the employer's needs. In sum, she concisely explained how her background and strengths will benefit the employer. Let's sum up a few things we've covered in this podcast. First, we've talked about INFP types and some interview challenges specific to them. My advice to my INFP listeners is to use your natural warmth, flexibility, and passion to your advantage in an interview, but keep yourself in check. You're naturals at tuning in to the other person, so tune into your interviewer and match his or her style. If he or she is direct and assertive, boost yours, within reason, of course. Be straightforward and expressive. Show the interviewer why you're a great candidate for this position. And this goes to anyone tuning in. Practice, practice, practice. I can't say this enough. Get real, honest feedback from a trusted person about your communication. What do you do well, and what do you need to work on? As annoying as this may sound, getting out there and interacting with others in networking situations is one of the best ways to prepare for an interview. First impressions mean everything. My other big takeaway: do your research. Don't go into any interview blindly, or you'll just set yourself up for failure. The key is to focus on the needs of the employer and the interviewer instead of your own when answering interview questions. Many thanks to my listener Maria, who asked this question about INFP interview struggles, and to David and Teresa for their help in putting these episodes together. The last thing I'll say is that there is so much more that goes into effective interviewing than I've covered in this podcast. If you or someone you know is in need of a mock interview or would like some help with communicating effectively during an interview, please reach out to me at www.atopcareer.com.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to hear more, or you'd like to submit a question yourself, then you can find us at www.atopcareer.com. Until next time. MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.